Michael Davis moved to Crestwood with quiet optimism. The town was small, peaceful, and carried none of the noise of the city he had left behind. He wanted a place where he could focus, rebuild routine, and continue the discipline he valued. Fitness had always been a part of his life. It kept him grounded, steady, and in control. So, when he saw a modern gym a short walk from his new apartment, he decided to join it without hesitation. Crestwood Elite Fitness Center looked bright and welcoming from the outside. Through the large windows, Michael could see people working out, chatting between sets, sharing motivation. It looked like a place where anyone could come to improve, to grow, to feel supported. Michael stepped inside, believing he was entering a space built on effort and mutual respect. He approached the front desk. The receptionist glanced up briefly as if surprised to see him, but said nothing at first. Michael smiled, polite as always, and said he wanted to purchase a membership and possibly hire a personal trainer to refine his form. The receptionist hesitated, then called one of the trainers over. His name was Brad. He walked toward them confidently, the kind of man who expected to be admired. He had the casual ease of someone used to being treated with approval. But when he reached the desk and saw Michael standing there, his expression changed. The friendliness drained from his face. His shoulders stiffened and his jaw tightened, like someone had placed something unpleasant in front of him. Michael held out his hand and introduced himself. Brad didn't take it. He didn't even acknowledge it. He looked past Michael, as though he wasn't really there, and said to the receptionist, clearly enough for several people nearby to hear, "I'm not working with him." There was no confusion in his tone, no attempt to soften it. It was rejection spoken plainly, confidently, without fear of consequence. The room did not fall silent, but the shift was unmistakable. A glance here, averted eyes there. A quiet awareness that something ugly had just happened, and no one intended to do anything about it. Michael felt the familiar weight of being judged without being known. It was not new. It did not shock him. But it did cut deeply in a quiet, steady way. The kind that leaves no visible wound but lingers. He could have walked out. He could have responded. He could have let the moment define him. Instead, he nodded once, more to himself than to anyone else, and said, "I'll train on my own." He walked to the weight rack and began warming up. His movements were slow, precise, controlled. He didn't look at anyone, but he could feel their eyes. Some curious, some dismissive, some satisfied with what they believed they understood. But Michael did not waver. He had been underestimated many times before. He knew what to do. He would not argue for space. He would take it. This was only the first day, and it would not be the last. Michael returned to the gym the next morning, just after sunrise. The building was almost empty at that hour. Only the steady hum of treadmills and the distant clank of plates broke the quiet. He preferred it this way. In the early light, there were no whispers, no sidelong glances, no unspoken judgments hanging in the air, just effort, just breath, just work. He warmed up slowly, stretching his shoulders, rolling his wrists, moving through familiar motions. His body responded with memory, steady and reliable. This gym might not have welcomed him, but the weight did. It behaved the same for everyone who lifted it. It did not care about skin, background, or assumptions. It only cared if he showed up. As he began his first set of squats, a pair of gym regulars walked in. They noticed him immediately. One of them nudged the other, and both exchanged a glance. Not openly hostile, but dismissive, as though they had already decided he would not last here. Michael didn't acknowledge them. He had learned long ago that recognition gave power where none was deserved. As days turned into weeks, his routine became steady. He trained with focus, precision, and a quiet confidence. His progress was visible. Stronger lines in his shoulders, more stability in his lifts, deeper control in his movements. He was not there to impress. He was there to grow. But the whispers did not fade. Sometimes they were sharp enough to catch. "Didn't think he'd stick around," someone murmured near the dumbbell rack. "Probably trying to prove something," another replied. Michael heard them, but he didn't react. He had no interest in proving anything to people who had already made up their minds. Yet slowly, something in the atmosphere began to shift. It happened in small, nearly invisible ways. A man struggling on the bench press asked Michael if he could spot him. Michael did, steady, careful, with no judgment. A woman unsure about her deadlift form asked for advice. He spoke gently, explained the mechanics, and moved on without expecting thanks. People noticed, not everyone, and not immediately. But effort has a way of speaking even when the speaker stays silent. One afternoon, a new member arrived, a tall man with strong arms but uncertain posture. He loaded his barbell for deadlifts, but moved in a way that clearly risked injury. Michael watched for a moment, debating whether to intervene. He had no desire to be seen as correcting others uninvited, but he also couldn't ignore someone about to hurt themselves. He approached slowly and spoke in a calm voice. If you shift your weight back a bit and keep the bar closer to your shins, it'll protect your lower back. The man looked up, surprised, not offended, just curious. He tried the adjustment and immediately felt the difference. His relief was obvious. "Thanks," he said, breathing out. "You know what you're doing." Michael nodded. "I studied kinesiology, and I train a lot." The man smiled lightly. "Then why aren't you a trainer here?" Michael paused, not bitter, just honest. "I wasn't exactly welcomed in that role." The man's expression changed, not pity, but recognition, understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that something in this gym was wrong. He offered his hand. "My name's Aaron." Michael shook it. That moment was small. It did not silence the whispers. It did not erase the earlier humiliation. But it marked the beginning of something different, something shifting beneath the surface. Where some chose to dismiss him, others were beginning to see him, not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. And that was only the beginning of the change to come. Over the next several weeks, Michael's presence in the gym became impossible to overlook, not because he sought attention, but because the consistency of his effort spoke louder than any words could. His discipline contrasted sharply with the casual routines of others. He arrived early, left late, and never once complained. Even those who had once dismissed him began to realize there was something solid and unshakable about him. Brad, however, watched him with a growing irritation. He had expected Michael to leave, quietly, quickly, and without resistance. Instead, Michael remained, improving steadily, setting a quiet example without asking permission. Every time someone asked Michael for advice, every time Michael helped someone lift safely, Brad saw a small crack forming in the invisible hierarchy he believed he controlled. One late afternoon, the gym was crowded. The air felt heavy with sweat and the rhythmic thud of music from the speakers. People moved from machine to machine, focused on their routines. A young man named Lucas, new to the gym and eager to prove himself, loaded heavy weight onto the bench press. Too heavy. Far too heavy. His friends stood nearby, laughing, cheering him on, confident that effort alone could replace technique. Lucas lowered the bar once, shakily, and struggled to push it back up. His arms trembled, his breathing shortened, and panic began to flash across his face. His friends froze, unsure of what to do. Michael saw it instantly. He moved toward the bench without hesitation, his steps steady, his expression calm. He reached down, guided the bar up and back onto the rack with controlled strength. Lucas sat up, coughing, embarrassed and breathless. "You all right?" Michael asked quietly. Lucas nodded, avoiding eye contact. "Yeah, I just thought I could do it." "It's not about proving anything," Michael said. "It's about building strength the right way. You push too fast, you get hurt, and then you can't train at all." Lucas looked at him then, really looked, and nodded with real understanding this time. "Thanks." But the moment did not end there. Brad had been watching from across the room. He stepped forward, his voice loud enough for several people to hear. "You shouldn't be giving instructions," he said sharply. "You're not staff here." Michael turned to him, expression unchanged. He needed help. I wasn't going to let him get injured. "That's the staff's job," Brad replied, "not yours." Michael held his gaze steady and unbothered. "You weren't helping him." The room shifted subtly. People pretended to look away, yet they listened. The tension was quiet but unmistakable. Brad's jaw tightened, frustration rising, not because of what had happened, but because his authority had been challenged without anger, without disrespect, without any fault he could point to. Michael didn't stay to argue. He simply moved on with his workout, leaving the words behind him like weights dropped softly on padded flooring. But everyone in the gym felt the shift. The silent rule that some people belonged and others did not had been broken, not with confrontation, but with presence and competence. People began to talk differently, some with curiosity, some with admiration, and in Brad's case, with resentment that grew heavier every day. Michael kept training. He didn't know it yet, but forces were already moving beneath the surface. Small conversations, quiet observations, the slow but steady turning of perception. Something was changing, and it was leading toward a moment no one in the gym expected. News travels quietly in small places. Not loudly, not all at once, but through small conversations and passing remarks. Over time, more members of the gym began to notice the way Michael carried himself. He didn't interrupt anyone. He didn't force himself into conversations. He simply moved with purpose. He listened. He helped when help was needed. And most importantly, he stayed consistent. The ones who had first whispered about him began to greet him with a nod. A few even with a short, respectful, "Hey." The atmosphere was slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifting around him. But Brad felt it clearly. Every moment Michael earned respect without trying, Brad felt something tightening inside him, something uneasy, brittle, and uncomfortable. It wasn't just that Michael had been underestimated. It was that he was proving, simply by existing with quiet strength, how wrong that underestimation had been. One evening, the gym's owner, Mr. Lawson, visited to check in on operations. He was a man in his early 60s, composed, tired, and more practical than sentimental. He walked the floor slowly, observing the gym the way someone might look at a house they once cared for, but no longer felt attached to. He watched Michael for a moment, squatting with steady form, guiding another member's positioning with a patient tone. There was no showmanship, no ego, just knowledge being used to help. "Who's that?" he asked one of the staff. "That's Michael," they said. "He's not a trainer. He just knows what he's doing." The owner watched in silence. Something in Michael's presence stood out. Not just his discipline, but the respect he drew quietly without requesting any. Later, Brad approached the owner, gesturing toward Michael with irritation he didn't try to hide. "He's overstepping," Brad said. "He thinks he knows more than the trainers." Mr. Lawson regarded him calmly. "Does he?" Brad hesitated. "He acts like it." "That's not what I asked," the owner replied. Brad didn't answer. The silence did instead. Mr. Lawson had seen many types of people in this business. Loud confidence rarely impressed him. Quiet competence always did. As the weeks passed, Michael and Mr. Lawson exchanged brief nods, light greetings, nothing more. But the owner was observing even when Michael didn't notice. Meanwhile, Brad's resentment sharpened. His frustration seeped into his tone with clients. He became shorter, harsher, less patient. Members noticed, even if they didn't comment. People sense when respect shifts in a room. One afternoon, a small group of gym members gathered near the water cooler, discussing routines. One of them mentioned Michael's advice and how it had helped reduce back pain. Another nodded and said they wished he were a trainer. The words weren't said loudly, but Brad heard them. His expression hardened. It wasn't just jealousy. It was fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of being overshadowed. Fear of being compared. Michael knew none of this. He was still just showing up to train, focused only on his growth and the small moments where he could help others stay safe. But something else was beginning to take shape. Slowly, subtly, inevitably. Respect had begun to shift in the room, and once respect moves, everything else eventually follows. The first real turning point came on a quiet Tuesday evening. The gym was less crowded than usual, the air calm, the music low. Michael was finishing a set when he noticed Mr. Lawson sitting alone in his small glass-walled office, staring at a stack of papers with a tired expression. The door was open, but no one approached him. It was clear he didn't expect anyone to. Michael hesitated only a moment before walking over and lightly tapping the doorframe. "Everything all right?" he asked. The owner looked up, surprised. not by the question, but by who had asked it. Just business, Mr. Lawson said with a weary sigh. I'm thinking about selling the gym. Michael didn't react right away. He had not expected to hear that. Not so plainly, not so soon. Why? He asked. Mr. Lawson leaned back in his chair. It's been 20 years. I built this place from nothing, but I'm tired, and you can only push so hard for so long. I don't have the energy for it anymore. There was no drama in his tone, just truth, heavy and simple. Michael nodded slowly, absorbing the words. He looked around the gym, the rows of equipment, the mirrors, the floor worn down by thousands of steps and repetitions. For many people, this place was just a building. But he saw something else. Potential. Not the flashy kind, not the kind built on marketing or slogans, the kind built on people, on community, on growth, on being seen and respected. He looked back at the owner. Do you know who you want to sell to? Not yet, Mr. Lawson said. I've had a few offers, some investment groups. They'd probably turn this into just another franchise gym. Impersonal, efficient, cold. Michael was quiet for a moment. His heart beat a little harder, not from nerves, but from something deeper, something steady and certain. He spoke carefully. What if you sold it to someone who actually cares about what this place could be? The owner studied him for a long moment, not just looking, but seeing. You, he said quietly, not as a question, but as recognition. Michael nodded once. Yes. There was no arrogance in his tone, no desperation, only clarity. Mr. Lawson exhaled slowly as though releasing something he'd been holding for years. If you're serious, he said, we'll talk. And that was how it began. Not with a dramatic announcement, not with applause, not with an argument won or a rival defeated, but with two men sitting in a quiet office, acknowledging something true. Michael did not have the money, not all of it, not yet, but he had something far more valuable to begin with: purpose, credibility, and the respect of those who mattered. The next weeks became a blur of planning, late nights, reviewing numbers, calling old contacts, and saving every spare dollar. He worked more hours than he slept, but he did not struggle. He committed. Meanwhile, Brad noticed something was happening, but he did not yet understand what. He only sensed the shift, the owner and Michael talking more, the atmosphere changing, the balance tipping. He felt the ground beneath him begin to move, and he was not ready. Michael, however, was. He was preparing not just to belong here, but to lead.